Once upon a time, in the vibrant town of Iboma, there was a restaurant that no one could stop talking about. The restaurant belonged to Madame Eben, a woman as mysterious as she was famous for her mouth-watering dishes and firm rules. People came from villages far and near to savor her jollof rice, pepper soup, and freshly pounded yam. But there was one strange rule that left everyone puzzled. A rule that was as strict as it was unusual. Water was forbidden in her restaurant. Not a drop was allowed, neither for drinking nor cooking, and it was a rule Madame Eben enforced fiercely. Customers found this baffling. What kind of restaurant did not allow water? Some said it was superstition, others whispered of curses, but no one dared to ask her directly. And if anyone tried to sneak in a bottle of water, Madame Eben's sharp eyes and swift hand would catch it before the bottle could even be opened. Those who broke the rule were either thrown out or given a cold, silent stare that sent them running. Among those who found this rule strange was a young woman named Ifeoma. Ifeoma had recently moved to Iboma to stay with her aunt, helping her with her small tailoring business. She was known in the town as curious and thoughtful, always questioning things most people ignored. In her short time there, Ifeoma had become fascinated by Madame Eben's restaurant and, more importantly, the mystery of the water ban. Ifeoma often passed by the restaurant on her way to run errands, and each time she would slow her steps, peeking in through the large glass windows to observe the bustling activity inside. She was drawn to the place, intrigued by Madame Eben's strictness, but also by the whisper of something darker in the air around it, something people avoided speaking of directly. One evening, Ifeoma was sitting with her friends outside a small cafe when someone brought up Madame Eben's restaurant. "Have any of you actually asked her why there's no water allowed there?" Ifeoma asked, leaning forward with a curious look. Her friend Amaka, a lively girl with a knack for gossip, chuckled. "Ah, Ifeoma, you're new here. Everyone knows there's something off about that place, but no one asks Madame Eben questions. They say she has reasons only she and the spirits know." Ifeoma frowned. "Spirits? That sounds a bit too mysterious for a restaurant, don't you think?" Another friend, Chitty, shrugged. "Maybe. But if it's true, it would explain why she guards that rule so strictly. People say she once kicked out a man just for bringing in a bottle of water, threw him out like he'd insulted her ancestors." The table erupted in laughter, but Ifeoma was quiet. She was no stranger to family rules and traditions that seemed strange at first glance. Her own family carried its own set of customs, most of which she hadn't questioned deeply. But Madame Eben's rule felt different. It felt haunted. Later that night, after her friends had gone home, Ifeoma strolled back to her aunt's house. She couldn't stop thinking about the restaurant, about the way people tiptoed around the water ban as if it were more than just a rule. She recalled the tense faces of the few people who dared to joke about it, the way their eyes darted around as if afraid someone, or something, might be listening. The next morning, Ifeoma was running errands for her aunt when she passed by the restaurant again. To her surprise, the door was propped open, and inside she could hear Madame Eben's firm voice scolding someone. Ifeoma's curiosity got the best of her, and she quietly stepped closer to the door, peering inside. A young boy, barely 10 years old, was clutching a small plastic bottle of water, looking both defiant and frightened. Madame Eben towered over him, her gaze hard and unyielding. "I have told you before, child, no water is allowed here. Take it away at once." Her voice echoed through the restaurant, and her expression was so intense that the boy took a step back, visibly trembling. But my mother said I could bring water to drink with my food," the boy stammered, his voice barely a whisper. Madame Eben's face softened for a brief moment, but her voice remained stern. "Your mother is not the one who makes the rules in my restaurant. No water, ever. Now go." The boy hesitated, his hand still gripping the bottle tightly. Ifeoma could feel the tension in the air, as if something terrible might happen if the boy didn't listen. "Leave it, boy." Madame Eben's voice cracked, her face suddenly filled with something Ifeoma couldn't quite identify: fear. In that instant, Madame Eben snatched the bottle from his hands and threw it out the door. It rolled to Ifeoma's feet, the water sloshing inside. Ifeoma looked down, momentarily frozen. Madame Eben's gaze followed the bottle, and her eyes landed on Ifeoma, who was still standing by the door, wide-eyed. Madame Eben's face turned cold, and for a split second, Ifeoma saw a flash of panic there, a glimpse of something deeper and darker than just anger. She immediately bent down, picked up the bottle and handed it back to the boy, who gave her a grateful nod before scampering off, his small footsteps echoing down the street. As he disappeared, Madame Eben's expression shifted back to her usual stoic demeanor. She looked at Ifeoma, her face unreadable, and gave a slight nod before turning and walking back inside. Ifeoma watched her go, feeling unsettled by what she had just witnessed. The way Madame Eben reacted, it was as if the sight of water itself had struck fear into her heart. Ifeoma stood there for a moment, processing everything. She couldn't shake the sense that this wasn't just about a restaurant rule or personal superstition. Madame Eben's reaction was too intense, too filled with dread. But what could be so terrifying about a single bottle of water? For days, Ifeoma tried to ignore the nagging questions in her mind, but they persisted, pulling at her curiosity like an itch that wouldn't go away. Eventually, she decided to dig a little deeper. After all, she reasoned, if there was nothing behind the rumors, she would find out quickly. But if there was something real behind Madame Eben's fear, well, that would explain a lot. She started with the town's elders, visiting them under the guise of helping her aunt with a delivery business. Whenever she had a chance, she asked them questions, hoping to catch a clue about Madame Eben's past. One day, during a quiet moment with an old woman named Mama Folake, Ifeoma carefully brought up the topic. Mama Folake, I hear that Madame Eben has strict rules in her restaurant, she began, choosing her words with care, especially about water. Do you know why? Mama Folake's face immediately darkened, and she glanced around, as if checking that no one else was listening. Ah, Ifeoma, she sighed. You are young and curious, but some things are better left alone. There are reasons, old reasons, why water is not welcome in her place. Madame Eben. She is guarding something that even she may not fully understand. What is she guarding? Ifeoma pressed, feeling the tension rise within her. Mama Folake shook her head, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sadness. It is not my story to tell, my dear, but if you truly want to know, you must look to her mother, Ayabo. She was the first to own a restaurant years ago by the lake. The lake? Ifeoma's curiosity spiked even further. The lake on the outskirts of Iboma was known to be serene, a popular place for fishermen but otherwise quiet and untouched. It didn't seem connected to Madame Eben's restaurant in any obvious way. Yes, the lake, Mama Folake whispered, her voice barely audible. But beware, Ifeoma. Some truths are like salt in an open wound. They sting and linger, and sometimes, they make you wish you had left them buried. Mama Folake's words stayed with Ifeoma, heavy and unsettling. That night, Ifeoma lay in bed, unable to sleep, her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the lake, Madame Eben, and the mention of Madame Eben's mother, Ayabo. Ifeoma had heard whispers of tragedy surrounding the lake, but they had always been vague, half-forgotten tales. The following day, Ifeoma returned to her aunt's house but found herself unable to concentrate on her work. Her mind drifted, and her hands moved absent-mindedly as she pondered the mystery further. She knew she had to go to the lake to see if there was any trace of Ayabo's story left there. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Iboma, Ifeoma finally gathered the courage to visit the lake. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of birds. Ifeoma stood by the water's edge, staring out over the calm surface, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes, breathing in the stillness around her. Somehow, she could almost feel a presence there, something lingering, silent but watchful. It was a strange feeling, one that sent a chill down her spine. Then, just as she was about to leave, she noticed something glinting on the shore, half buried in the mud. She reached down and picked up an old, tarnished pendant shaped like a droplet of water. It looked old, almost ancient, with a faint engraving on its surface. She turned it over in her hands, trying to make out the design. In that moment, she felt a strange connection, as if this pendant held a piece of the story she sought, as if it had somehow survived years of silence and was now waiting for someone to discover it. Clutching the pendant tightly, Ifeoma rose, her mind filled with questions. She knew now that she couldn't let this go. There was a story here, buried in time, and Madame Eben was at the center of it. As she walked away from the lake, Ifeoma glanced back one last time. The water lay still and silent, reflecting the fading light of the setting sun. But beneath its surface, Ifeoma sensed something deeper, something ancient and waiting. And she knew, in her heart, that the story had only just begun. Ifeoma couldn't shake the feeling that the pendant she'd found by the lake was more than just an old piece of jewelry. She'd spent the night turning it over in her hands, wondering if it was a forgotten relic of Madame Eben's family. The next morning, with the pendant tucked safely in her pocket, she resolved to dig deeper into the strange tale of Madame Eben's water ban and its connection to the lake. There was only one person she could think of who might know more: Mama Yuzo, an elder who had lived in Iboma her whole life. Mama Yuzo was known for her knowledge of the town's history, especially the stories of families who had been there for generations. If anyone knew about Madame Eben's past, it would be her. With a quiet determination, Ifeoma made her way to Mama Yuzo's house, a small, old bungalow with plants spilling from every corner of the yard. As she approached, she noticed the faint scent of herbs drifting through the air. She hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door, wondering if the elderly woman would even be willing to talk about something so sensitive. "Ah, Ifeoma," Mama Yuzo's voice called from inside. "Come in, child. I saw you coming from the window." Ifeoma pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. Mama Yuzo sat by a low table, a steaming pot of herbal tea beside her. The old woman gestured for Ifeoma to sit. "What brings you to my home this early?" Mama Yuzo asked, her sharp eyes studying Ifeoma's face. Ifeoma shifted nervously but took a deep breath. "Mama, I came to ask you about Madame Eben and her family. I heard there was something that happened a long time ago by the lake." Mama Yuzo's expression grew serious, and she glanced toward the window, as if making sure no one was nearby to hear them. She let out a deep sigh, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "That lake holds memories, Ifeoma. Memories that many in this town would rather forget," she said, her voice low. "But it seems you've already stumbled upon part of the story." "Yes," Ifeoma replied, pulling out the pendant from her pocket and showing it to Mama Yuzo. "I found this near the lake yesterday. I think it might be connected to Madame Eben." Mama Yuzo's eyes widened as she took the pendant in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly. "This pendant belonged to Ayabo, Madame Eben's mother," she whispered. "I remember it well. Ayabo used to wear it every day, never taking it off. That was before everything changed." "What happened, Mama?" Ifeoma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mama Yuzo's gaze turned distant, as if she were looking into the past. She took a slow sip of her tea before beginning. Ayabo was a lively woman, strong and stubborn. She ran a small restaurant by the lake, just like Madame Eben does now in town. Her food was famous, and people from all over Iboma came to taste it. She had a special connection to the water, you see. The lake was her source of peace and inspiration. She would often say that the lake spirit, Aya Omi, watched over her and blessed her work. "Aya Omi?" Ifeoma echoed, leaning forward. "Yes, the guardian spirit of the lake," Mama Yuzo continued. "According to legend, Aya Omi was a powerful being, a water spirit who protected the lake and blessed those who respected her. But Ayabo's relationship with the spirit went beyond respect. They shared a bond and understanding. Ayabo's mother had told her that as long as she honored the lake and kept certain rituals, Aya Omi would continue to bless their family. So what changed? Ifeoma pressed, sensing that the story was only just beginning. Mama Yuzo closed her eyes for a moment before continuing. One year there was a terrible drought. The lake's water level dropped, and people in the town grew desperate. Ayabo, following the old ways, pleaded with Omi to spare them, to bring rain. But the town leaders, they didn't believe in such things. They saw the lake as a resource, something to be used, not honored. And so, they decided to dig deeper into the lake, hoping to bring up water to fill their wells. Ifioma felt a chill run through her. They disrespected the spirit? Mama Yuzo nodded. They did. Ayabo warned them, begged them to stop, but they wouldn't listen. To them, it was just a lake, just water. And soon after, terrible things began to happen. First, the fish in the lake started dying, floating up to the surface in droves. Then, one night, a fierce storm came, a storm like no one had ever seen before. It flooded the lake and destroyed Ayabo's restaurant. And, well, they say she was in there when it happened. Ifeoma's hand flew to her mouth, horror filling her eyes. She died. Mama Yuzo nodded slowly. Yes, only her daughter, Eben, survived. She was just a young girl then. But when they pulled her from the wreckage, she was clutching this very pendant you hold now. Ifeoma felt a strange weight in her hand as she looked down at the pendant. It suddenly seemed heavy, filled with the weight of lost memories and untold stories. But why would that lead Madame Eben to ban water from her restaurant? Ifeoma asked, trying to understand. Ayabo's death wasn't just an accident, Ifeoma. The town elders believed that Omi cursed Ayabo's descendants for what had happened. She was angered that Ayabo's warnings were ignored and that her lake was desecrated. So she placed a curse upon Ayabo's bloodline, forbidding them from ever using the lake's water, or any water, without consequence. What kind of consequence? Ifeoma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mama Yuzo's face turned grave. Any attempt to break the curse would bring disaster, sickness, even death. Madame Eben knows this. She was raised with the knowledge that to touch water is to invite the spirit's wrath. It's why she forbids it so strictly in her restaurant. Ifeoma sat in silence, processing the weight of what she had just learned. It was as if the puzzle pieces were finally falling into place. Madame Eben wasn't just enforcing a strange rule. She was protecting herself, and perhaps the whole town, from an ancient curse. But doesn't Madame Eben feel trapped by this? Ifeoma asked. Surely she must want to live freely, without the fear of a curse. Mama Yuzo looked at Ifeoma with a sad smile. Perhaps, but we are all bound by the choices of those who came before us. This is her inheritance, one that she can neither escape nor break. She accepts it because she believes it keeps her safe. And as long as she honors the pact, she will remain unharmed. Ifeoma felt a deep sadness settle over her. She could barely imagine what it must be like to live under such a shadow, to carry the burden of a curse handed down through generations. Yet, part of her couldn't help but wonder if there was a way to break free from it. Thank you, Mama Yuzo, Ifeoma said, standing up and clasping the pendant tightly. I think I understand now. Mama Yuzo nodded, her gaze softening. Be careful, Ifeoma. Curiosity can be a double-edged sword. Some truths are better left undisturbed, like water left to settle. Ifeoma gave a small nod, though her mind was already spinning with questions. She had learned about the curse, yes, but something told her that there was still more to the story. What exactly had Ayabo promised the spirit? Was there any way to make amends? Ifeoma couldn't bear the thought of Madame Eben living in fear her whole life, constantly looking over her shoulder as if waiting for the curse to strike. The next morning, Ifeoma couldn't resist returning to the lake. She felt drawn to it, as if the water itself was calling to her, whispering secrets that she couldn't quite hear. She stood by the shore, watching the water ripple gently in the morning breeze. It was hard to believe that something so calm could hold such a terrible history. Taking a deep breath, Ifeoma whispered into the quiet, Omi? Are you there? For a moment, nothing happened. Then, just as she was about to turn away, she felt a cold gust of wind rush over her, chilling her to the bone. The water rippled, almost as if it were responding to her call. Ifeoma's heart pounded, but she steadied herself, determined to continue. I know you're angry, I know the people of Iboma wronged you, but Iabo's family Eben. They've suffered enough, don't you think? The water remained silent, but Ifeoma felt a strange sense of presence, as if the spirit were listening. I understand that Iabo tried to protect the lake, that she wanted to keep the bond with you alive. Ifeoma continued. Her daughter has honored that bond too, even if it means living in fear. Isn't there a way to forgive them? As if in response, the lake's surface shimmered, and for a brief moment, Ifeoma thought she saw a face in the water. A woman's face, both beautiful and sorrowful, her eyes filled with a sadness that seemed centuries old. Aya Omi? Ifeoma whispered, her voice trembling. The face faded, leaving only the gentle ripples of the lake. But Ifeoma understood the message. The spirit had heard her, and maybe, just maybe, there was a way to bring peace to Madame Eben and her family after all. Feeling a surge of hope, Ifeoma turned and began walking back to town. She would need to speak with Madame Eben, to tell her what she had seen and heard. Perhaps together, they could find a way to lift the curse and honor the spirit in a way that would bring lasting peace. But as she neared the town, Ifeoma couldn't shake the feeling that breaking the curse wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, perhaps even danger. But if it meant giving Madame Eben a chance at freedom, Ifeoma was willing to take that risk. With determination in her heart, Ifeoma resolved to confront Madame Eben. She would uncover the truth, face the curse, and do whatever it took to bring peace to the family haunted by the lake spirit. And so, the journey began, with Ifeoma holding the pendant close, feeling the weight of Iabo's memory and Aya Omi's silent, watchful presence behind her. When Ifeoma returned to town, her heart was set on speaking to Madame Eben directly. She had seen the lake, felt its quiet presence, and glimpsed something of Aya Omi's sadness. The spirit's face, sorrowful and mournful, lingered in her mind. Ifeoma knew that if anyone could help lift the weight of this curse, it would be Madame Eben. But she was also aware that the truth of Aya Omi's curse might be darker and more binding than she could imagine. The next morning, she walked to Madame Eben's restaurant with purpose. She found Madame Eben outside, sweeping the front steps as the morning sun cast a soft glow over her stooped figure. Despite her resolute expression, Ifeoma could see a heaviness in the lines of her face, as if the weight of the past clung to her shoulders. Madame Eben, Ifeoma called out gently. The older woman looked up, surprise flashing briefly in her eyes. Ifeoma, she said in her usual guarded tone. You are up early. Is there something you need? Yes, Ifeoma replied, stepping closer. But it's something I don't think you'll want to hear. It's about the lake, about your mother, Iabo, and about Aya Omi. Madame Eben's face froze, and she looked away, her fingers tightening around the broom handle. Who has been speaking to you about such things? She asked, her voice a strained whisper. No one, Ifeoma answered, choosing her words carefully. I went to the lake myself and I felt something there. I also found this. She reached into her pocket and held out the pendant she had found. Madame Eben's face softened, her eyes filling with something Ifeoma hadn't expected, grief. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against the pendant before she pulled her hand back, as if the small object held a memory too painful to touch. That was my mother's, Madame Eben said, her voice barely audible. She wore it every day, even on the night she died. Taking a deep breath, Ifeoma continued, I've heard pieces of the story, madam. I know about the pact with Aya Omi, about the curse. I know you're afraid of breaking the rules, but maybe there's a way to end this. Madame Eben let out a shaky breath, her gaze shifting to the distant hills beyond Iboma. Do you think I haven't tried, Ifeoma? She whispered. Do you think I haven't wished, prayed, begged for a way to break free of this curse? My mother spent her life honoring that spirit. And for what? For her life to be stolen in a single night. For me to carry a burden that I never asked for. There was a pause, and for the first time, Ifeoma saw the full weight of Madame Eben's sorrow. She realized that this woman, so stoic and fierce in her rules, was carrying a grief that no one else could see. But you've stayed faithful, Ifeoma said softly. You've kept the pact, and I think that's worth something to Ayaomi. I saw her at the lake. I think she's waiting for us to honor her differently, to end this without losing more. Madame Eben shook her head, a bitter smile crossing her lips. You are young, Ifeoma, and hopeful. But the curse is not so simple. Ayaomi did not just place a prohibition on water. She placed a restriction on my bloodline. She demanded that my family would never use water without facing ruin. It was her revenge for the town's betrayal. So, it wasn't just about the lake's water? Ifeoma asked, her heart sinking. No, Madame Eben replied. The curse was designed to ensure that our family line would live under constant restraint. We are forbidden to cook with water, forbidden to drink it in any space we own, and any attempt to use it freely brings disaster. I have seen it myself. When I was younger, I tried to break the rule just once. What happened? Ifeoma asked, her voice filled with both fear and curiosity. Madame Eben's face darkened, her jaw tightening. I was barely 19. I thought I could defy the curse, that it was nothing more than a story. I used water in my cooking, thinking I would be safe. But that night, the customers who ate my food fell gravely ill. Some even died. That was when I understood that the curse was real, that it would not be ignored. Since then, I have never allowed water in my restaurant. I keep it away from every meal, from every pot and dish. Ifeoma was silent, letting the weight of Madame Eben's words sink in. It was a curse far more serious than she had realized, a punishment that had become a prison. But if Ayaomi placed this curse out of betrayal, maybe there's a way to make amends, Ifeoma said, struggling to find hope in the grim situation. Maybe if we honored her somehow, showed her that your family is still loyal. Madame Eben looked at Ifeoma, her expression one of exhausted disbelief. How can Ayaomi be convinced? Ifeoma? The spirit was betrayed by our town, by those who wanted to exploit her lake for their own gain. What could we possibly offer that would be enough to appease her? Ifeoma thought about the sorrow she had seen in Ayaomi's face, the sadness that had seemed almost human. I think she feels abandoned, Madame Eben. She's seen people forget the pact, ignore her presence. But if we approached her, showed her that your family still remembers, still honors her. Madame Eben's gaze softened, and she looked down at the pendant in Ifeoma's hand. There is a ritual, she murmured. A ritual my mother once told me about, though I thought it was just a story. She said that, if the lake spirit ever grew angry, there was a way to seek her forgiveness. But it would require someone with courage and purity of heart, someone willing to risk themselves. A flicker of determination sparked in Ifeoma's eyes. Then let me do it. Let me be the one to ask for her forgiveness, madam. I'm not from your family, but I am willing to honor Ayaomi. I'll do what it takes to lift this curse. Madame Eben looked at Ifeoma, surprise and hesitation mingling in her gaze. This is dangerous, Ifeoma. You are asking to place yourself in the hands of a spirit whose wrath is deep. You might not survive it. I know, Ifeoma replied, her voice steady. But I believe Ayaomi deserves to be heard, to be remembered properly. If this ritual can lift the curse, it will be worth the risk. After a long silence, Madame Eben nodded. She reached into a drawer inside the restaurant and pulled out a small, weathered book. She opened it to a faded page, her finger tracing over words written in an old, nearly illegible script. This ritual, she said, requires you to go to the lake at midnight. You must bring an offering, something precious, something you are willing to part with forever. And you must recite an old invocation to call upon Ayaomi. If she accepts your offering, she may lift the curse. But if she doesn't, Madame Eben's voice trailed off, the warning unspoken but clear. I understand, Ifeoma replied, taking the book and carefully studying the invocation. Madame Eben watched her with a mixture of admiration and worry. You are a brave girl, Ifeoma, she murmured. Braver than I was at your age. My mother was willing to do anything to protect me from the spirit's wrath, and I spent years believing that we were powerless against it. But maybe you're right. Perhaps Ayaomi can be reasoned with. As the sun set that evening, Ifeoma prepared herself for the ritual, feeling both excitement and fear pulsing through her. She thought about what she would bring as her offering, something precious enough to show her sincerity. She chose a small beaded bracelet her grandmother had given her, a gift she had treasured since childhood. The hours slipped by, and when the time finally came, Ifeoma walked to the lake, the bracelet clutched tightly in her hand. The night was silent, the air thick with anticipation. She reached the edge of the water and knelt down, holding the book Madame Eben had given her. Her heart pounded as she read the ancient invocation aloud, her voice carrying over the still water. Aya Omi, guardian of the lake, spirit of the waters, I come to honor you, she called out, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. I bring this offering as a token of respect, in the hopes that you may forgive those who wronged you, those who have since honored your presence. As she spoke, a ripple spread across the lake, breaking the stillness of the water. She held out the bracelet, lowering it into the lake as her offering. The water stilled again, and for a moment, Ifeoma feared nothing would happen. But then, the water began to glow softly, a pale, ethereal light spreading over the lake's surface. A chill ran down her spine as she watched a figure slowly emerge from the water. A woman, her features serene but filled with an ancient sorrow. It was Aya Omi. The spirit looked down at Ifeoma, her expression unreadable. Why have you come, child? The spirit asked, her voice like the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. I have come to ask for forgiveness, Ifeoma replied, her voice shaking slightly. Forgiveness for Madame Eben's family, who have honored your memory, and for the town that once betrayed you. They are ready to make things right, if you allow it. Aya Omi's gaze softened, and she looked out over the lake, as if remembering something from long ago. The pain of betrayal runs deep, young one. But so does the memory of loyalty. Ifeoma held her breath as the spirit extended her hand, gently touching the bracelet that floated on the water's surface. Your offering is accepted, she whispered. The curse shall be lifted, but remember, the pact must be kept. If it is broken again, my wrath will be fierce. With those final words, the spirit faded back into the water, and the lake's glow disappeared, leaving only the gentle ripple of the water's surface. Ifeoma exhaled, feeling a weight lift from her heart. She knew the curse had finally been broken. With tears in her eyes, she whispered a thank you to the spirit before turning back to the town, ready to share the news with Madame Eben and bring an end to the haunting past. When Ifeoma returned to town that night, she was almost trembling with relief and disbelief. The lake spirit, Aya Omi, had heard her, had accepted her offering, and, more astonishingly, had agreed to lift the curse. Yet, the spirit's final warning echoed in her mind. The pact must be kept. If it is broken again, my wrath will be fierce. She knew that their freedom came with a price. They would still need to honor the pact to keep Aya Omi's goodwill. The next morning, Ifeoma went straight to Madame Eben's restaurant, her heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. She wanted to share the news, but she also worried about how Madame Eben would receive it. When she entered, she found Madame Eben standing behind the counter, preparing food. The usual bustle of the restaurant was subdued, as if the weight of the past days still hung in the air. Madame Eben, Ifeoma called gently. Madame Eben looked up, and her stern expression softened when she saw Ifeoma. You're back, she said, her voice carrying a hint of worry. Did you go to the lake? Ifeoma nodded, moving closer to the counter. Yes, and I saw her, madam. I saw Aya Omi. She listened to me and she accepted my offering. She lifted the curse. Madame Eben's hands froze, her face shifting from disbelief to cautious hope. Are you certain, Ifeoma? I have lived under that curse my whole life. My mother died because of it. How can it simply end? I can't explain it fully, Ifeoma admitted. But Aya Omi said she would lift the curse. She warned us, though, the pact must still be honored. We cannot betray the lake again, or she will return with vengeance. Madame Eben seemed to absorb this, her eyes distant as she processed the news. Slowly, she put down the knife she was holding and took a deep breath, as if allowing herself to believe it. My whole life, all I've ever known is caution, to follow the rules without question. And now you're telling me that it's over. Yes, Ifioma said, her voice filled with warmth and certainty. You're free, Madam Eben. Your family's bond with the curse is lifted. But we must still honor the spirit. She is giving us this chance to live without fear, but only if we respect her wishes. Madam Eben nodded slowly, a faint smile breaking through her usual guarded expression. Then, Ifioma, we will honor her. From this day forward, we will keep a pact of respect with the lake, with Aya Omi. No more fear, only gratitude. In the following days, the town began to notice changes at the restaurant. Madam Eben, in a gesture of newfound freedom, allowed her customers to bring in water for the first time. Although there was still a sense of reverence in the air, the fear that had once surrounded the restaurant began to dissolve. The regulars came and went, curious but respectful, drinking water alongside their meals as if it were a precious gift. Word of the change spread quickly, and people from all over the town and nearby villages flocked to the restaurant to see it for themselves. Despite the newfound freedom, Ifioma and Madam Eben agreed to establish a tradition of honoring the lake. Every month, on the full moon, they would visit the lake together and bring offerings of food, flowers, or beads, small tokens to keep the bond with Aya Omi alive. Madam Eben even crafted a small altar at the edge of the lake, a quiet space marked by stones and wildflowers where the offerings would be laid. They shared this ritual with the community, inviting others to join them if they wished. The first time they visited the lake together, Ifioma felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. She could see that Madam Eben, too, felt lighter, as if the years of grief and fear had finally lifted. As they laid their offerings at the edge of the water, Madam Eben whispered a simple prayer, her voice carrying a gentleness Ifioma had never heard before. "Thank you, Aya Omi," she murmured, her gaze soft. "Thank you for this peace." As time passed, Ifioma noticed changes in Madam Eben beyond the restaurant. The woman who had once been stern and unyielding had become softer, more approachable. She even allowed herself to laugh more freely, to engage with her customers in a way that showed the warmth beneath her once guarded exterior. For the first time, Madam Eben seemed to be living fully, no longer constrained by the shadow of her family's past. One evening, as Ifioma helped close up the restaurant, Madam Eben looked over at her with a grateful smile. "You know, Ifioma," she began, "my mother always believed that our family would be cursed forever. But you showed me that sometimes courage can change even the darkest fate. I owe you more than words can express." Ifioma felt a surge of pride and joy, realizing that her journey to uncover the truth had not only freed Madam Eben, but had also brought the two of them closer together. She had found family in a woman who had once been a stranger, a bond forged through courage, resilience, and the willingness to face a legacy that others had feared. And as the months turned into years, the pact with Aya Omi continued. Each visit to the lake became a celebration of the connection between the town and the spirit, a bond of respect and honor. The restaurant thrived, drawing even more visitors, who came not only for the food, but for the warmth and peace that filled the space. One afternoon, as the restaurant bustled with life, an old friend of Ifioma's from the village, Amaka, arrived. She had heard about the restaurant's change, about the lifted ban on water, and she had come to see it for herself. "Ifioma," Amaka called out, waving as she walked in. "I can't believe it. People say Madam Eben allows water now. Is it true?" Ifioma grinned, gesturing to the glasses of cool water being served to tables around them. "It's true, Amaka. The restaurant is free of the old rule now, and Madam Eben is happier than ever." Amaka looked around, taking it all in, her eyes wide with wonder. "I didn't think I'd see this place change so much," she said with a smile. "It's as if the whole town feels lighter now." As the friends sat and talked, Ifioma felt a quiet contentment settle within her. She knew that their lives in Iboma would continue as they always had, but with a new sense of harmony and freedom. They had honored the past and bridged the divide between the living and the spirit world, ensuring peace for the future. In time, Ifeoma found herself running the restaurant more often as Madame Eben gradually stepped back, spending more time with friends and in the town she had once felt distanced from. The restaurant had become more than just a business. It was now a place of connection, where traditions were kept alive but without the heavy shadows of fear. And every month, as promised, Ifeoma would make her way to the lake, carrying a small token of respect to lay at Aya Omi's altar. She continued the tradition with joy, grateful for the connection it fostered, and for the chance to carry on the story of her journey. Years later, as Ifeoma finally took over the restaurant completely, she felt that her life had come full circle. She was no longer just the curious girl who had once peered in through the restaurant's windows, wondering at the mystery within. She had become a part of its story, and through her, the memory of Ayabo, Madame Eben, and Aya Omi would live on. One late evening, Ifeoma stood outside the restaurant, looking out toward the hills. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet thank you to the spirit who had given them peace. The night air was calm, and as she listened to the faint sounds of the town around her, she felt a deep and abiding peace within her heart. The curse was no longer a burden. It had transformed into a legacy of honor and respect. And as Ifeoma looked toward the horizon, she knew that, no matter what the future held, Iboma would always be a place of resilience, where the past and present lived in harmony. For Ifeoma and the town of Iboma, the mystery of the water ban had ended, replaced by a story of connection, love, and unwavering respect for the forces that shaped their world. And that story would be told for generations, woven into the lives of those who would come to call Iboma home. Years had passed since Ifeoma and Madame Eben had first lifted the weight of the curse that had shadowed Iboma. In that time, Ifeoma had transformed the restaurant into a beloved landmark, known throughout the region for its delicious food, welcoming atmosphere, and the deep-rooted respect for tradition that set it apart. She had taken great care to keep alive the memory of the pact with Aya Omi, and each month, like clockwork, she made her journey to the lake with offerings of thanks and reverence. With Madame Eben no longer at the helm, the restaurant had flourished in ways Ifeoma never anticipated. Madame Eben herself had become somewhat of a legend in town, a symbol of strength and resilience, and although she had quietly stepped back, her presence lingered in the restaurant's very walls. It was as though her spirit watched over the place, approving of how the legacy she and Ifeoma had created continued to thrive. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Ifeoma sat outside the restaurant under a sky dotted with stars. The calm of the night settled around her as she closed her eyes, letting the memories of her journey wash over her. She remembered the fear, the courage it took to face the lake, and the peace that had followed. It was a story she carried proudly, one that she hoped would be told for generations to come. As she sat lost in thought, a small voice broke her reverie. "Auntie Ifeoma?" A young girl's voice called. Ifeoma looked up to see her niece, Ada, standing there, her wide eyes filled with curiosity. "Yes, Ada," Ifeoma said with a smile, patting the bench beside her. The young girl quickly took a seat, her face lit with excitement. "Auntie, Mama told me about the lake and Aya Omi. She said you saved the restaurant and helped Madame Eben make peace with the spirit. Is it true?" Ada asked, her voice filled with awe. Ifeoma chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair away from Ada's face. "Yes, it's true. It wasn't easy, but sometimes the things that matter most aren't easy. Aya Omi deserved our respect, and she taught us that even the smallest actions can have lasting consequences." Ada's eyes shone as she listened, absorbing every word. "Mama said we honor Aya Omi because she's part of our family story now. Can I come with you next time? To give her an offering? Ifeoma smiled warmly. "Of course you can. It's important for you to know our history, Ada, and to respect the pact we made with Aya Omi. I'll show you the way, just as I was shown. That's how we keep her spirit alive." Ada beamed, visibly excited at the idea of visiting the lake with her aunt. She was young, but Ifeoma could already see the spark of curiosity in her eyes, the same curiosity that had driven her own journey years before. And she knew that as long as there were people like Ada to carry forward the story and traditions, the pact with Aya Omi would endure, binding the generations in shared reverence and unity. The following month, Ifeoma made her usual journey to the lake, this time with Ada by her side. The little girl clutched a small bundle of wildflowers and beads, her gift for Aya Omi, and walked with careful steps, her eyes wide as they approached the edge of the water. "This is where it all began," Ifeoma told her, kneeling down by the lake's edge. "The lake gave us peace, but we had to give our respect in return. Remember, Ada, that the lake is alive and Aya Omi watches over it. As long as we honor her, she will bless us in return." Ada nodded, her young face filled with reverence. Together, they laid the flowers and beads at the small altar Ifeoma had maintained all these years. The lake's surface shimmered in the moonlight, and Ifeoma felt a sense of quiet fulfillment wash over her. She sensed, somehow, that Aya Omi was watching, her spirit satisfied with this gesture of respect. As they turned to leave, Ada tugged on Ifeoma's sleeve. "Auntie, can you tell me more stories about Madame Eben and the restaurant? I want to know everything." Ifeoma chuckled, wrapping an arm around her niece as they walked back toward the town. "Oh, there are plenty of stories, Ada. Stories of strength, of courage, and of honoring those who came before us. And one day you'll share these stories too." The two made their way back under the night sky, with Ifeoma feeling a deep sense of pride. She knew that as long as stories of Aya Omi and Madame Eben were passed down, the spirit's blessing would remain, watching over Iboma and its people. She had honored the past, secured the present, and laid the foundation for the future. A future where her legacy, and that of Madame Eben and Aya Omi, would live on. In time, Ada would tell these stories to her own children, passing on the legacy of resilience, respect, and connection. And so, in this way, the pact with Aya Omi would endure, woven into the very heart of Iboma, a reminder that the bonds between the living and the spirit world must be cherished and respected. And whenever the townspeople gathered at the restaurant, drinking their water freely and savoring the joy of their shared heritage, they would think of Ifeoma and Madame Eben, whose courage and respect for tradition had brought them peace. The restaurant continued to thrive, a symbol of resilience and honor in Iboma, where every visitor felt the presence of something sacred, something lasting. A legacy forged from the past, kept alive in the present, and bound to a future as enduring as the lake itself.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel Folktales King so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Here is another story I'm sure you will enjoy. Click on it to watch now.